When I got to Baghdad in 2003, I found there were 2 pirated editions which were on sale there, very badly translated into Arabic, and 1 edition which had been translated by the Mukhabarat, by the secret police. I knew the deputy mayor of Baghdad at that time, and he said, look, I have a present for you. It was picked up by looters in the house of Sababi. He's a brother-in-law of Saddam Hussein. He used to be interior minister. And it was a bit chilling. It was in a little, it wasn't nice to color like this, but it was soft green covers. And had been very carefully, they translated this whole book. And so I thought, I hadn't come back to Baghdad during that period because they wouldn't give me a visa, but I'd also been kind of worried if they did let me in, what would happen. And as soon as I saw this translation, I thought, I'm really glad I didn't come back under Saddam. So we'll see. I don't see why they should. On the other hand, in Iraq, you never know. Yeah, I was very nervous that a bad translation or appearing in a local newspaper, often completely distorting what you've said, might be very dangerous.
Palm Springs, California.
Hello.
Hi.
A couple quick things about Al-Qaeda in Iraq. I'd like to know exactly what you think about the theories I've developed from reading stuff on the internet and just, reading stuff, is that there was only a few hundred foreign fighters a few years ago, according to our own military. So how all of a sudden is everything in that country, Al-Qaeda in Iraq? And the other thing is with Zarqawi and now this al-Masri guy, Zarqawi was reportedly killed on the eve of the war, so that was probably a CIA operation to say he was still in charge, and this new guy that they claim is in charge looks like a computer generation of an Arab. So I'm just wondering what you actually know about Al-Qaeda and what is really going on in that country.
Yeah, I don't think Zarqawi was killed before the war. He was killed, when was it, much more recently. I think that Al-Qaeda was mostly a homegrown operation. Some guys started coming in 2003. They had a lot of money, very ruthless. The suicide bombers are generally people who've signed up from Saudi Arabia, from Yemen, from Libya, wherever. And often they think they're going to fight in Iraq. But it's actually very, it's difficult for Americans to be a foreigner in Iraq. It's also difficult for these people to be a foreigner in Iraq. Iraqis kind of don't like foreigners full stop. So they end up as suicide bombers. Somebody mentioned earlier, training for suicide bombers. There's no training. These guys put on an explosive belt, they blow themselves up. This is not rocket science. So they're cannon fodder, pathetic cannon fodder, but very dangerous cannon fodder. And one of the effects of, it's also a mistake to see that all the insurgency is just being Al-Qaeda. In fact, it's always been a minority. It's always reported as Al-Qaeda here, but it's much broader than that. But Al-Qaeda did have a very toxic effect in Iraq, because we were always going to have friction, we were always going to have bloodshed. But these Al-Qaeda bombs, enormous bombs, ton of explosives, blowing up in a Shia marketplace, killing 100 people, poor day laborers waiting for a job, blowing up in religious processions, killing people who were just on pilgrimage. This created the bloodbaths that we had in 2006, 2007. Now, for the moment, that's gone away. But Al-Qaeda remains there, and this idea that it's disappeared just isn't true. In certain provinces, in Anbar, the local tribes turned on Al-Qaeda, but in Baghdad, a lot of these awakening councils, the Al-Sawar groups, they're not against Al-Qaeda, they are Al-Qaeda. I was talking to one of them who said, a few weeks ago, and he said, look, he said, none of our officers dare walk home without having some relationship with Al-Qaeda, else you'll get killed. And Iraq is like that. The U.S. Army is trying to replicate what happened in one part of the country in all parts of the country, but it's not really doable.
Last call for Patrick Cockburn, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hi, thank you, C-SPAN. Patrick, I have just one quick question. I wonder how the Iraqi people and how the U.S. citizens would feel if they knew that right now the State Department is negotiating with the Iraqi government to give up some of their sovereignty for U.S. safety. Now, what kind of democracy is that? Can you elaborate, please?
Well, yeah, there are these negotiations, you rightly say, going on at the moment. And as I mentioned earlier, the Iraqi Prime Minister said they're not going to sign up, saying the sort of demands by the U.S. really leave Iraqi independence so truncated, so limited, that Iraq has very little power. And this is widely known in Iraq. It's much more widely known than here. Not just in terms of U.S. bases, but in terms of immunity for U.S. troops, ability to arrest anybody, immunity for contractors, contractors who are often ready, so you see them careering through the streets of Baghdad with their guns, you know, very dangerous. I always tell my driver, just stop, get out of the way of those guys. You don't know where they're going to shoot. And often ill-trained, you know, sometimes you wonder if these guys are sober. And so that package is not going to go through for the moment. But at the same time, the Iraqi government is very dependent on the U.S. They're under great pressure, the Iraqis say, from President Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney's office to sign up by the 31st of July. It'll be very difficult for them not to do that. They'll need some concessions, but will these be real concessions? Will they be cosmetic concessions? And at the end of the day, you know, if there's an agreement which is opposed by a great mass of Iraqis, it will be divisive, it will be resisted, and it won't be a recipe for peace, it'll be a recipe for more war.
Tomorrow on Washington Journal, Alice Hunt from the Center for New American Security talks about the recent resignations of the Secretary of the Air Force